I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a lot of movement going on upstairs. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Ian Talks. I'm trying to figure out the schedule of all of this. It seems like we're going to do an episode every Friday. Eventually we'll move to every Thursday, but right now it's going to be sticking to every Friday, whatever time I can get it out, because these videos are a little more complicated to edit than the Forever Talking episodes are, so we'll get it out when I can. But I was pondering what today's episode should be about. I already know what next week's episode is going to be about. It's going to be about the ones who live. So I was trying to figure out if today I wanted to talk about the Kendrick Lamar thing going on with Drake and J. Cole, because I did have a video planned where I basically said that I thought Kendrick Lamar is probably up there as one of the most talented, if not the best artists in our generation today. I set that video aside long before this whole Kendrick-Drake beef, and I didn't, well, the Kendrick-Drake beef has been going on for a long time, but the like that verse and the big three thing going on between Drake, Kendrick, and Cole. But I don't really want to get into beef, even though I feel like that video would be relatively important right now. But I feel like if I make that video, there's no winning. I'm going to get shit from every side on that one. So I'm going to go ahead and stay clear of that. I also had some plans to talk about Dune 2, but unfortunately with my schedule, I haven't been able to get to it quite yet. So that kind of sucks. So I think what I've settled on is the incredible downfall, possible resurrection, but inevitable destruction of the brand new show. Well, I guess it's not that new. It's been out for a couple years, but the show that everybody's been talking about as of late, Invincible. Is the show Invincible here to stay? Because while it premiered, it was the most successful, hottest thing going then, created numerous TikTok memes with...
Why did you make me do this? You're fighting so you can watch everyone around you die. Think, Mark. You'll outlast...
Which is basically, that's like the bouncer in that SpongeBob episode, like who lets people in. If your show is able to create a meme that's used on TikTok for a long time, you're in. And season 1 was very capable of doing that. Unfortunately, there was a massive break in between season 1 and season 2 because of, you had the writer strike, and because they only made one season whenever the show was launched. So of course it was going to take a long time before season 2 gets out. Animation processes take a very, very, very long time. But then season 2 came out, the first 4 episodes, and we were back. The hype train has started, it was roaring, it was going on. And then Robert Kirkman came out and said, hey, we're gonna go ahead and take a little bit of a break so audiences can digest how important the mid-season finale was, and we'll be back sooner rather than later. And unfortunately, sooner rather than later meant like 4 months, and the hype for the show completely died off. It came back, nobody had any idea, and for the first time, I actually started seeing it back on my TikTok feed as of last night's episode, where it was Mark versus Anissa, or Anissa, whatever you want to say. And now if you read the comics of Invincible, you know why. That is a relatively interesting part, but I have my own theories as to why Invincible has found the success it has, how it can maintain it, and essentially what they can do moving forward to ensure they don't die. Because taking a mid-season finale break was something that The Walking Dead did quite often. They did it actually every single season, I believe. But the difference between The Walking Dead and Invincible is the medium that they're being distributed on. The Walking Dead is a live-action show, 16 episodes per season, disbarring the later seasons, an hour apiece each. It's 8 hours of content. With Invincible just coming back and the hype as big as it was, you only got about an hour, I believe, per episode. I can't remember how. I believe each episode's about an hour, right? Maybe 45 minutes, something like that. But then the show came back, or the show came back for season 2. The hype was enormous because we finally got the season 2 after the very long wait, because season 1 ended in such a phenomenally written way. And then you go through the 4 episodes, and then the break comes, and then the break is a lot longer than what was originally thought or hoped for, and it just got to the point where people stopped talking about the show. And then it came back and the hype was dead. Nobody really cared. Fortunately, I think at the end of the season, it's going to start picking up a little bit here, especially with next week's episode, I Thought You Were Stronger. If you read the comics, you kind of know what that's all about. But it's yet to be seen if the Invincible show has actually gotten to the point where you can say, yeah, the hype is back. Because personally, I don't feel like it is. I feel like it's trending in that direction. But the very, very long break really assassinated the hype for the show. But I would argue that the break was actually not a bad idea. The length of the break was the issue. It's not uncommon for shows to take a month-long break for the holiday season, just in December as families are traveling, getting together for holidays and Christmas and New Year's and blah, blah, blah. And then the 1st of January starts and then you're back on schedule. But the show waited 3 months after that with no, predetermined date on when they were going to come back. They were just pre-hyping hype regularly, pre-hyping the announcement date for the show to come back, and that's going to piss off audiences. I think studios don't realize these days that, yeah, some audience members are not very smart, just look on Twitter, but a lot of them still have very common ideals where they see that something is being hyped for another hype thing, and that pisses people off. But the break for Invincible and the length of it and that killing the hype for the show, if you look on YouTube, you can see that that's been talked about to death. What I want to talk about today is Invincible a show, after hitting its first slump, viewership-wise, so early on, is the show something that can stick around for a very long time? Because if you've read the comic books, you know that the Invincible series is long and complicated and has a lot of shit going on. I would argue that in the show we haven't even scratched the surface. We're not even close. You're probably going to get 6, 7, 8 seasons of Invincible if you were able to run out the entire comic book adaptation. And I have my own problems with Invincible. I think that the gore is a little bit much at times. I'm all for radar and goriness and blah, 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 but I think it can affect some of your audiences. Now, it's not enough to turn me off from watching the show. But whenever the train scene happened, Chicago happened, I get it. It was supposed to impact you and make you feel some type of way. But very hard to bring back Nolan if you're going to, as a redeemable character, if you continue to push him in that direction. But I think that the comic book does that in some capacity in a very successful way. Which is why I kind of had faith, but man, did they fucking go far in the show about, making Nolan as ruthless and as destructive as humanly possible. Crazy. But I think what Invincible is going to run into problem-wise is that Mark Grayson, his adventures and storylines continue outside of the Viltrum issues that are going on. And where was all the hype in Invincible? Where did it peak? It peaked at the end of season 1, whenever that whole story was coming to a head about who is Nolan, where is he from, who's Omni-Man, what's going on with the Viltrum Empire. And then when season 1 ended, you wanted to kind of feel that again. You wanted to figure out what was going on with the Viltrumites. Who are these people? What's coming? Where did Nolan go? Season 2 came back and it started off with its own little spin-off, but not really spin-off, talking about Angstrom Levy, adapting, showing what would happen if Mark actually went with Nolan, and they continued having Nolan in the show and Omni-Man in the show for a little bit, and then they went away for 2 episodes, and then Mark focused, and then you focus on Mark's grief and his trauma, and then Mark started getting back into it a little bit with some other things, and then Nolan came back for the mid-season finale in the end of episode 3, and then the hype was back on for that episode, and then the fight happened, and then the mid-season finale happened, and now the hype died again. So where is the hype in the viewership at its peak with Invincible? It's very easy to see, especially with, I feel like, the hype coming back with Anissa showing up for this episode, which then sets up Conquest and sets up, a lot of other Viltrum things and a progression of that storyline. Peak and hype for the show at its best is at the point in time where it's about the Viltrumites. It's about Nolan. It's about Mark. It's about those things going on. And Invincible, in the comics, he has a lot of other issues going on, mostly Angstrom Levy, besides the Viltrumites and all that shit. But the Viltrumites are easily the most interesting thing happening in that show, and then the Viltrumite War that ends up coming. Both of the side characters in the Ancient Levy storyline and the other issues and other storylines that Mark starts to follow, like the relationship with Oliver and the robot storyline, I'm afraid that if you don't capture people's attention with that, that's gonna kill the show, because there's a lot of that shit. I feel like the majority of audiences care more about the Viltrumite stuff going on, and I don't want to get to the point where you're 4 seasons in and we have more side shit going on than the Viltrumite story and progressing that story, because we want to adapt everything in the comics. Now, obviously, you can't keep doing the mid-season breaks. That's gonna kill the show immediately. But my personal opinion with Invincible is that if you want to keep the show going and you want to keep the hype on board and you want to keep it as successful as possible, maybe you don't have to, you don't have to adapt everything from the books. I think it's important that you do the Angstrom Levy storyline, but some of the other things that don't particularly have a lot of weight just gave Mark some shit to do at the time. Keep focusing on what the people care about. The people care about Omni-Man and Nolan, and they care about the Viltrumite army and the Viltrumite war going on. They care about Thrag coming in and Battle Beast. They care about sick, insane fights. That's why I feel like when the hype is at its worst at the beginning of the show's start, of course, and then because you're with those side characters and those things, not really focusing on the Viltrum army as much, or the Viltrumite storyline, nobody really cares. Or, people care, but I don't think you're getting the hype on board back again. Everybody who should be and want to watch the show. I think that Invincible has a very interesting opportunity to flip that on its head, because the season finale of season 2, I Thought You Were Stronger, is going to be an Angstrom Levy storyline. And then my guess is that they'll pick up with Conquest next season, which makes sense. And they've been building Angstrom Levy since the beginning of the season in little parts, and it's all coming to a head with this season finale, and it's a really big moment in the comics. So if they adapt this correctly and they make it incredibly interesting, then you can really kind of go in that route. But you have to get this right first, and I just don't want to see a world where Invincible is dragged out longer than it has to be, because the comics are so long. I don't want to lose hype with the show because we're trying to adapt everything from the comics, That might work in other mediums like anime and the Dragon Ball mangas and One Piece and blah, 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 but people complain about One Piece because it's too long. With the Invincible comics, it's already finished. You have a set start, middle, end. Figure out what was important in the comics and adapt it into the show. Don't adapt everything just for the hell of it. And I think that's how you can make sure Invincible sticks around. I want Invincible to be here for the long run. I don't want it to die, but also I don't want to do 7 or 8 seasons just because we feel like doing 7 or 8 seasons. Avatar: The Last Airbender is incredibly concise because it tells a story from start, middle, and end. It's not 8 seasons long. It knows what it wants to be. It doesn't waste time telling that story, and everything has important jurisdictions on Mark or an Aang and his character development, every character in the show and their character development. Focus on what's important in Invincible, adapt what's important for that character, for the important characters, and move on. And I think Invincible should end at season 5, personally. I don't want to see it dragged on for the sake of it being dragged on. That's just my thought, because I think if you drag it on, the hype for it will never come back and it will die. And that would be not great. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Ian Talks, where you use your valuable time to come hang out with me and talk movies and comics and video games and TV shows and shit. And next week's episode, we're going to be doing a full series review of The Walking Dead: The Ones Who Live. And that's about it. I hope to see you on the next one. Peace, love, adios. Bye-bye.